Craig Custance with us, ESPN.com, NHL, looking at the hire of Dave Hakstol. We had him on the show yesterday, but what are some of the things? Now, he was a very interesting guy. You know, he talked about the decision he had to make. Some reports say he turned down the job a couple times before he finally decided to change his mind. Yeah. What is some of the insight around the hockey world that you're hearing about him from other teams?
Yeah, so you're hearing kind of the same descriptions of him in that he's very serious. He's going to be very prepared. He's meticulous in how he's going to approach this. Imagine he's got a lot of learning on the job to do in this position, but at the same time, he's going to put the legwork in this summer. Talk to the right people. One of the guys I talked with is Arizona Coyotes coach Dave Tippett, who they both have places in Minnesota. They spend the summer, and they both played at UND, and they've gotten to know each other through the years. And he said, look, he's a guy that's going to put in the work necessary to make the adjustment and to make this jump. But at the same time, in talking to guys that played for him, they said, look, yes, he's serious. He's going to hold you accountable, but he's not a guy that you can't have fun with. I had a player tell me, one of the things that guys would. His hair, apparently he's had the same hairstyle for the last 20 years, and he kind of took it and laughed. And it's one of those things. So he's not one of those guys who's so uptight that you have a hard time. And they just said, look, he's a guy. After a while, that he brings out the best in you. You end up realizing you're performing to the max of your capabilities, and you appreciate that.
With this Flyers team and this Flyers roster, is this the right kind of change for them to go get a virtual unknown, virtually complete prize of a move? Is this the right roster to bring in this type of coach, or should they have gone with a more veteran presence, like some of the bigger names?
Well, that's going to be the question, and that's going to be the criticism if it doesn't work out. But what I'll say is I don't think the Philadelphia Flyers are overnight away from competing for a Stanley Cup. This is a process, and like we talked about the other day, this is a team that's going to have to build out its defense. That's something you can't do in free agency. You have to develop those defensemen. So we're talking about a 2, 3, 4-year process in Philadelphia. So, perhaps bringing in a guy that's to win right away, Mike Babcock or Todd McClellan, maybe that isn't the answer. You bring in a guy that's in for the long haul that can have a little bit of a learning curve. If the Flyers struggle for the first half of next season, it's not the end of the world. We're talking about a big picture thing, and it gives him the opportunity to learn on the job a little bit here. So, I think there's risk. I'm not willing to give this hiring a free pass, but I don't mind it in the terms of that this is, they're looking at, Ron Hextall's looking at the big picture here, and this isn't a hire that's for tomorrow. It's for the next 4 or 5 years.
The Flyers have a lot of young defenders. Does a move like this suggest, that maybe those guys will get a better shot, that he's more used to working with younger players and that he can get those guys developed faster? Because they have a lot of good young defenders that just, they've been afraid to bring up. Does this kind of say maybe those guys might get a chance to play this year?
Yeah, it's certainly, I'm sure that was part of the process. You have a guy that's known for player development, who's known for working with young players and doing it successfully. A couple guys I talked to yesterday said they wouldn't be in the NHL probably if it wasn't for Dave Hakstol. So that's a credit to him and his ability to max out the players' talent. So, yeah, I think it bodes well for some of the younger players. And think about it. If this was a Flyers team that had a bunch of guys in their late 20s and their 30s that were expecting to win a Stanley Cup next year, and you bring a guy in from college, I think that would be a really tough sell to that room. But instead you have they have a couple first-round picks. You have all these young defensemen that you're referencing. I think it's a little bit of an easier sell to a room like that. Now it's just going to be convincing guys like Claude Giroux to get on board. And I'm sure he will.
Yeah, and that should be interesting. I know yesterday Ron Hextall said there will be no discrepancy of who's in charge. Dave is in charge, and they kind of seem like they targeted him. That's the way they tried to make it yesterday. Do you think that he was the number one guy on their list?
To me, clearly, it seems that he was, because they made the hire. It's not like all these other coaches went away, right? And the Flyers ended up settling for this. And we saw it a little bit with Pittsburgh last year and the hire that they made Mike Johnson. And you knew that wasn't their number one choice. But in this case, the Flyers are one of the first teams to make a hire. And that, to me, indicates that Ron Hextall, he identified the guy he wanted and went out and got him.
Should be interesting to see. Much like, and I like the piece you wrote over at ESPN.com, because are you believing that the college game, much like in the NFL, where the Eagles went out and got Chip Kelly, he said no, they went out and got him, he came back, he said, all right, I'll do it. You see the college game in football morphing in. You see college basketball coaches, come to the NBA more frequently. But are you starting to see more of the college hockey game? Do you think you'll begin to see more of that style in the NHL game?
It may simply hinge on this hiring, and not to oversimplify it, but the NHL is a copycat league, right? So when Dan Bilesma wins a cup with the Penguins, everybody wants to hire the next Dan Bilesma. And when Darryl Sutter and Joel Quenneville win Stanley Cups with Chicago and LA, everybody's trying to find that veteran coach. Well, if Dave Hakstol goes out and the Flyers win a cup in 3 years, I promise you, there's going to be 3 or 4 college coaches hired, and that's how these, it becomes a trendy thing, and that's just how it works. And so give Ron Hextall credit; he's a little bit ahead of the curve. So let's say this is a great hire, and I think time will tell. He went out and got the first of the guy. You never want to be the guy that's hiring the 5th or 6th best college coach to run your NHL team.
That's true. Craig Custance has a full column on this over at ESPN.com. The challenge is ahead for Dave Hakstol. It's a great read. Craig, we appreciate the time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.